Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. So when I was a student in school and also when I was studying economics at university, I had teachers and lecturers telling me how important it is that I keep up with the news and that not only do I read the news, but I read it kind of critically and I view it through the lens of an economist. The problem is it was never something that anyone did with me or showed me how to do it, so I wasn't always sure I was doing it right. And also it's not something that gets checked up upon, so it really has to be a sort of on your own volition to do it. And it's not really until I found myself surrounded by economists where we can discuss it that one, it's become a bit more of a habit, but two, I actually feel a bit more confident in doing so. So I thought what would be really interesting is when I remember is to go through an article on here, and then you guys can also maybe in your comments give you what your thoughts on it were and how you would critically view it. But also for those of you that are new to this, then hopefully it brings you a bit more confidence in doing that as well. So it's going to be articles that I feel that have annoyed me, basically, because that's the ones you're most critical with. And yeah, it'd be interesting to know what your thoughts are. So let's do this. So the article that I have chosen is from the BBC, and it was put up on the 15th of August, so I know I'm a bit behind, I'm just a bit slow at this, but hopefully I can get a bit more of a habit of talking about these and uploading them in a bit faster fashion. So the article is titled Wage Surge Raises, Prospect of Future Interest Rate Hike. Okay, so I've highlighted the wage surge raises part, so I know that this article is meant to be about increasing wages, but also automatically think to myself, okay, well, for this to really be kind of news, then maybe they're talking about real wages, because if this is nominal wages, this kind of isn't really that interesting. But let's get into the article, and I've made some annotations that you can read as we go along. Okay, so again, they're there with the sort of gripping titles, and they're saying wages grew at a record annual pace. But shortly after that, they go on to announce that it's regular pay. So straight away, I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's just nominal pay. Is this kind of really news? We already know that kind of nominal pay over the years has an upward trend, but also in terms of what people really care about is if, in real terms, their pay has risen, especially given it's a cost of living crisis. And now they've basically told us that the regular pay is what's growing. Okay, but I care about real pay. So, I mean, this article does, when you read on, go into talking about inflation, which is great. So it's saying that it knows we need to care about things in real terms. But we get down to about here and we read that actually wage growth is not quite outstripping the pace of price rises. So, no, it's in real terms, pay has fallen, it's declined. So again, I'm kind of struggling to see why this was really kind of worth reporting, but fine, we'll give it and we'll keep reading. But now I'm knowing that, okay, well, great, nominal pay's risen, but inflation's risen by more, so in real terms, people are losing out, so great. And then we get to this part here that I've highlighted, and it says stronger wages will stoke concerns that price rises will take longer to ease. I don't know, so this is pushing this same old rhetoric that gets pushed a lot, that pay increases are bad. And I can see why they're doing it, I just don't particularly like pushing that rhetoric. It's because it goes back to this wage price spiral that I spoke about in a previous video. But why I'm not particularly happy with that is because this wage price, so with wages rise, prices rise, that idea is known as the wage price pass-through, and really that's not 100% clear cut, and a lot of places try to make out as if it is, that if wages rise then prices will continue to rise, and it really isn't clear cut like that. Like, it depends on a multitude of factors. So for example, it depends on the profit margins of certain companies. Like, if they've got really large profit margins, they might actually just be prepared to take the slight hit to them and not pass through the wage rises that's now cost them more money through to consumers. So yeah, in which case we wouldn't see what's known as like 100% pass through. It also depends on how labour intensive the jobs are, because the less labour intensive, then increase in wages is kind of like maybe less affecting that. So it's not in all sectors. But also productivity. If we're in a cost of living crisis and people are struggling, it might mean they're not very productive, and therefore, if you were to increase their wages, we might find that they're suddenly more productive, and therefore the company isn't needing to pass through as much to prices because their productivity has kind of abated the negative effect of the wage increase. But also, what I mentioned in another video is unions are a lot less now than what they were back in the 1970s, and it's having those strong unions which really help aid this wages increases, and then that might lead to this wage price spiral. And then lastly, I suppose what's probably really important given the conditions we're in now is that the economic condition really plays a factor in the wage price pass through. So typically, if economic conditions are bad, what the theory tends to say is that maybe firms will be reluctant to pass on these higher costs in terms of prices onto consumers, because they're already finding maybe demand's not as strong, and they don't want to like dampen it further, they don't want to make it any worse, and it's when we're in stronger, better economic conditions, they're much more willing to pass those on. Well, we're in a cost of living crisis, we're in what's probably known as, a bad economic conditions, and therefore that might also say that if we were to raise these wages even more, we wouldn't see 100% pass through to prices, and therefore this concern is kind of not as necessary. I get what it's there, I do get that, but I just think it gives off the negative side to things when the answer isn't really clear cut. Okay, fine, it's always just something to take into account. So then what's going on here? Okay, so they're anticipating the Bank of England are going to raise the base rate even further. Okay, fine. So let's keep going on. It then goes on to talking about the unemployment rates, and the unemployment rates are already quite low, but it's saying that it's rising a bit more, fine. And then we've had this comment, the best way to be able to bring down interest rates down and stop them going up is to bring inflation down. I really don't know what that adds to this. Yeah, okay, we use interest rates as a tool for monetary policy, and the main objective of monetary policy in the UK is of price stability. So yeah, okay, they've risen because we've got inflation up. Okay, that's we fine, we get that. And also, I mean, they haven't said it in this article, but one of the biggest concerns with interest rates going up is all people keep talking about is how it's affecting people with mortgages. And I don't know if that's the right way to go, because I haven't actually fact checked this, but I don't think that the majority in the UK of people have a mortgage. I'd be very surprised if that's the case. So then really are we kind of catering to the majority if we say the reasons why we shouldn't raise interest rates is because of mortgage owners and they can really the majority in the economy? I don't think so, but again, I haven't fact checked that, so I'll need to look into that. Okay, then they show a nice little graph. I do like a graph. And they're showing how, I mean, it's such a short time frame, so it would be nice if they could have shown it for longer, but what I've done is I've done some arrows on there to show that in general we tend to have this upward trend, but okay, and then they've just gone to show that we're still lower than prices. But something that I put here that I thought would really kind of make this article newsworthy is if some more detail on which income enders experience these wage increases would be good. Because, I mean, if there's this overall average of nominal wages rising by 7.8%, and actually that's just happening at the top end of income earners, then again, I don't really think this is news. I think what would be great is if it was the fact that wages are rising and it's at the low income end, because they're the people that are really going to be affected the most by this and need their wages increased by more. But yeah, unfortunately, this article did just lack that level of information. They then say that the average pay growth in the private sector continued to outpace the public sector. Again, I'm not shocked by that whatsoever, so I didn't really think that was much news. Okay, and then we really focus on unemployment here, so the labour market, and there's this, firstly, the unemployment rate they showed before was low, but it's saying that whatever person's talking, some operator is struggling to recruit staff, and this isn't just something that's happening there, it's something that we're hearing from a lot of companies, that they're struggling to recruit staff, and we've got staff shortages, which kind of implies that there's this tight labour market. Which, I mean, in itself, if there's a tight labour market, in which case then basically the unemployment rate is really, really low, in which case kind of what you need to be competitive in terms of getting the people to come and work for your company is to normally pay higher wages or add some kind of work benefit, some kind of perk that wants them to come here. So in my case then I would say, well, maybe then if we've got such a tight labour market, and we need to raise wages in order to attract staff, that maybe that signals even less likely to pass on those prices to consumers. I mean, again, that's not 100% true, but we could be finding that, well, firstly, why are we finding such a tight labour market? What's happened? Well, if I remember rightly, since COVID, we tend to find that a lot of people just not returned back into the labour market. So, for example, people have decided maybe to retire early, or people are now out of work with long-term sickness or chronic illness. So that's why we're finding ourselves in this tight labour market. Okay, so let's just have a little look at what this was. The company has increased its wages to fill. Okay, yeah, exactly. So they've had to increase wages to fill shifts left by employees who, following COVID lockdown, decided they wanted a better work-life balance and therefore working fewer days. I don't just think it's that, but I get that's part of it. So they're having to increase wages by that. Okay, and then it mentions something called the triple lock. So for those of you who don't know, this was introduced in 2010, and what this is so state pensions are, there's three things that they kind of follow. So either average wage growth, the inflation, or 2.5%. So whichever one is higher is the one they definitely get. So yeah, I'm interested in this. Maybe it'd be interesting to hear people's comments on this. I'm not too sure I agree with this policy. So yeah, that's saying that pensioners are always cushioned against inflation, and I'm not entirely sure I completely agree with that. So it'd be interesting to know what you think. Like, why is it okay for workers in the economy to have a fall in real terms and not be cushioned against inflation, but we must make sure pensioners are? Especially when it's that generation that typically tend to be better off in terms of property and so on and so forth. So yeah, I don't know if this sits very well within this article at all. So they were my views and my comments when I very quickly read through this article. I basically, to sum it up, I didn't really think it was news, and I really thought that they could have given a bit more detail on things, and I do wonder if it was to try and almost put things out there to say that people shouldn't be complaining, but actually, because like pay's been growing, but actually it's in nominal terms, they're still losing out in real terms, and then for some reason they put this in at the bottom just to kind of, like, I don't know, almost rub salt in the wound to show that, well, pensioners aren't losing out in real terms and everyone else is. So yeah, I'm not entirely sure about that, but it'd be great if you read this article for you to write in the comments what your views on this was and anything else you picked out, because like I said, I just very quickly went through this.